Now, under South Africa's G20 Presidency, Minister in the Presidency for Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, Maropene Ramokgopa, is hosting the 4th G20 Development Working Group meeting and the G20 Ministerial Meeting on Development this week at the Kruger National Park. These meetings will bring together G20 member states, invited countries and international organizations to advance global development, cooperation and the financing of sustainable development. Minister Ramokgopa joins us for more. Minister, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. As we look at the theme, solidarity, sustainability and equality, what strategic priorities is South Africa bringing to the table under this theme?
Thank you very much for having us and good evening. We have several working groups, of course, that are in place. However, in this regard, we as the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, we are chairing the Development Working Group. The priorities, of course, of the Development Working Group informed by our theme, first of all, is the curbing of illicit financial flow so that we can then now be able to mobilize domestic resources for development. The second one is social protection flows so that we can then now mobilize money to be able to look after our people, but in particular to ensure that access to health, in particular maternity care, as well as a working environment, is actually some of the things that we are putting in place and wanting it to be a global standard. The last one is global public good, meaning that we want to find international and global cooperation and to be able to strengthen it further, most especially given the fact that what is happening currently globally, there looks like there is a regress as it relates to what has been set in place in the past, as it relates to international trade and general cooperation. So the three priorities are actually based on those things that I've just spoken about.
As you touch on what's happening globally, I mean, many developing countries are facing rising debt burdens, limiting their overall ability to invest in development. How then is the G20 addressing the need for one, to mobilize financing without necessarily exacerbating fiscal distress?
What we have actually spoken about, especially in as it relates to domestic mobilization of resources, we have said that as developing countries, we would like the globe to actually agree on putting regulatory systems, for example, the issues of global tax. How do we deal with it so that we can then now be able to have capacity building to ensure that all the other countries, especially in the developing countries, do not have the issues of illicit financial flow happening. And this usually happens because most of the investors that comes and invest in most countries do not actually adhere to global tax regulatory framework. So we would like us to actually have an agreement on how do we cooperate on a tax regime that would be able to assist most developing countries to then now be able to deal with their own mobilization of domestic resources so that they can deal with their own developmental agendas. But of course, we continue to then now say, how do we then now also strengthen multilateral institutions that are already in place so that cooperation can continue to be there and financing for development becomes the center of the day. If you may maybe remember, last week a few weeks back, we went to Spain and we did speak about the very same thing of financing for development. So we are continuing with it and we are making sure that this G20 will come up with a mechanism that would assist us to strengthen global cooperation as it relates to financing for development.
So given the historical imbalances in global development cooperation, how is South Africa planning to take a lead on this conversation that's both inclusive and action-orientated? Because it's all very well to discuss these plans and hold these meetings, but the devil is in the detail, the action that needs to take place.
What we have actually spoken about, one of the first things is that we need to stop looking at development as a cost and an expenditure, but we need to look at development as something that we can see as an investment in human capability and human resources itself. And because of that, then we are saying that we need to come up with partnerships as opposed to actually coming up with ways at which people can then now just receive. We're also saying that we need to put in modalities where accountability can be put in place so that at the end of the day, when countries actually give their monies or at least invest in multilateral institutions, there can be accountability mechanisms that would then now help them to then now be able to know exactly what is it that is being done with their money. But equally so, we are agreeing that there should be more effort put in place as it relates to accountability on what do we do with the monies that have been put in place so that we move away from coming up with pledges, but we come up, as you rightfully said, plan-orientated way of ensuring that whatever monies that are being put in place and they are being delivered to developing countries can actually do what they were supposed to do. But most of all, accountability mechanisms, that's what we are agreeing upon as it relates to financing for development.
Very well. Thank you so much for that. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Speaking there to Minister in the Presidency for Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, Maropene Ramokgopa, who's hosting the 4th G20 Development Working Group meeting.